Today, I want to give you a personal review of the latest movie, Inside Out 2, from me, a trauma recovery coach. So let me give you a brief overview on Inside Out 2 and some of my general thoughts. So the movie itself follows a gal named Riley. She's the main character. And in the first Inside Out movie, she was about 8 years old and she was going through a major transition in life. She was moving from where she lived to California. And that first movie introduced all kinds of emotions like happiness and sadness and disgust and fear and anger. And it was really appropriate. These were appropriate emotions for an 8-year-old to be feeling during this kind of transition. What's so cool about Inside Out 2 is they followed Riley to being now a teenager, and it really focuses on adolescence and all of the emotions that come up during puberty and when we're really changing, and how kind of abruptly these things take over our entire being. And they introduced new emotions like anxiety and embarrassment and boredom, or what they called ennui, like somebody who just doesn't give a shit, right? And what I found to be so interesting about the movie is, as a trauma recovery coach, I utilize a framework known as parts work. And I use this in pretty much every single session I do. And the idea behind it is we're all born with a self, and we're all born with a sense of self. And it kind of controls our life. How we view ourselves is the place from which we engage in life. And in parts work, the idea is self kind of gets detached from who we are, and other parts of us come up in survival of any kind of experience, and they kind of take over. So when I'm looking at a movie like this, it's interesting to see how they illustrated. They mention emotions, but I really see them as parts. The part of us that is rooted in anxiety, or giving us that anxiety sensation in our body. The part of us that is pushing joy and happiness forward to make sure everything in life is copacetic. The part of us that is rage and anger and frustration. And so what they were really showing in the movie, Inside Out 2, was how each of these parts goes to control our life in our benefit. Number one, all of it's done for the benefit of the person. But what was unique about this movie, and what caused me to gasp and sigh truly, was when they showed the idea of how our core beliefs, how our lived experiences caused us to form a core belief. And then what they so beautifully illustrated is how that core belief created your sense of self. I couldn't believe they did it. And then at some point, self gets thrown way far, far, far away, and a new sense of self is starting to generate, rooted in anxiety, rooted in this I'm not enoughness. And it's not as though the old self is gone. It's just so far distanced from the control panel. And so what you're really watching in the movie is all of these original parts, or these original emotions, go on a journey to go back to self and get self and bring it back to the control panel and put it back in control. I could not believe how beautifully they illustrated it, and more importantly, how they got these very, very poignant, important pieces in, which is the lived experience, the core belief that comes from the lived experience, the sense of self based on the core belief, and how as we age, that sense of self changes. The original self is not gone. It's just so far away. And I see when I'm working with my clients that much of what I'm doing is I'm a guide with them on a journey back to self and reattaching themselves to that self and bringing it back to the forefront. So I just thought it was beautifully done that way. So the movie really illustrates so beautifully the actual act of somebody getting disconnected from self. Now, in real terms, outside of the movie, how can that potentially happen? I came up with the saying a long time ago, which is when we have certain experiences growing up, we shed authentic pieces of ourselves to meet the needs of others, so our needs will be met. As humans, we have core needs that must be met. It's not a want, it's a must have. We need to know we have access to the most fundamental things: food, water, shelter. We need them for survival. Then we also need to know that there's a safety and security, not just physically, but emotionally, that's available to us at all times, that those pieces of us will be met. And then this third layer of need is love and belonging. I need to know I can show up as my full self, my full authentic self, rooted in confidence and creativity and curiosity and courage, that all of me can show up and be accepted. And if any one of those areas in our life feels as though it can't be met, we will probably shapeshift in survival as a young child to kind of discard or let go of a piece of ourself, or as I say, shed an authentic piece of ourself to see if that need will be met by somebody else. And if it is, it's perfect, like cause and effect. So we'll shed this piece of ourself to meet the needs of someone else, so our need will be met. It's a brilliant coping strategy. So in the movie, what they showed specifically was Riley is now a teenager. When we're teenagers, socially, everything has to do with feeling important, seen, heard, as significant, to be a part of a group. So much of our socialization as teenagers has to do with your social aspect. Like, am I a part of or not? When we belong, it means that we can show up exactly as we are, and that is more than enough. What we end up doing is, again, shape shifting so we'll fit in. I'm observing this is what this group would want. I want to be a part of that group that makes me feel safe and secure, but I'm going to drop a little piece of my authentic self in order to fit in. Okay. And so when we're shape shifting like that, we're distancing ourselves from our core self, and we're kind of inserting in a new player. So in the movie, what are a few things she does? She drops some friendships because she doesn't think those friends will fit into the new group. So she drops a couple of friends to be part of something bigger because that could secure her socially in high school. She colors her hair a little bit. They mentioned that she's from one state when in actuality she's originally from another state, but she never corrects them because she doesn't want to be seen as difficult. She just wants to be seen as like go with the flow, and because she wants to be accepted. So she actually doesn't speak her voice. She lets go of certain connections, and she actually physically starts to alter her look. She is going to basically agree to whatever's going on in the group think, you know, what kind of music they like, what kind of food they like, the way that they show up on the ice, because it has to do with ice hockey, in order to be accepted. And we all do this as teenagers. This is such like a rite of passage. But as we're doing that, we're doing it rooted in fear. If I don't do this, I won't be accepted. And if I'm not accepted, I'm going to be alone. It's very black and white. And that's a very anxiety-provoking thought process. So now your core self is lost, and this new self is rooted in anxiety. And so I thought the movie, I would love to know who they consulted because it was so beautifully illustrated and the important parts were covered as far as how we detach from self and how this new sense of self develops. The problem is this does happen for a lot of people when they're adolescent, teenager, and that is then the seat from which they live their life. And then 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, when they're sitting in my chair at 40, 50, 60 years old, They're like, I don't even know who I am because this is not me. And then I can say, you're here, you're way in the back. We need to go take a journey back to self and bring you, not this version of you, back to the front, so you can feel fully in alignment with your life. I mean, I have so many positive things to say about this movie, but for me, again, as a trauma recovery coach, where I'm constantly sharing with my clients that all parts are important, all parts are valuable, what I'm really saying is every part of you, even the emotions that you have that are super uncomfortable and seemingly seem unproductive, have a role, a really important role and a benefit, even if it's hindering your life, because these emotions or these parts come in of benefit of you. Okay. So even things like anger comes up because it's trying to protect you from something. In some cases, maybe anger is preventing you from having a close relationship with someone else. But the benefit that anger thinks it's doing is it's keeping you safe from getting close to people, because getting close to people hurts. See what I'm saying? So when we have all these different emotions, every single emotion has value. Every single emotion has a benefit and is working in your favor. Even in the movie Anxiety, it thinks it's doing something very, very positive for her, which is to predict possible outcomes, right? What I like about the movie is at some point, a group of the emotions that are not joy, so say sadness and fear and disgust and anger, are saying to Joy, who thinks it is her job to always be at the control panel, to make sure everything is happy and good all the time. They literally say to her, you're delusional. And she turns around and she says, of course I'm delusional. Like, it's not realistic to think someone's going to be happy 24/7. Do you know how much pressure it is on me to make sure that everybody's happy, that she is happy? It's a losing battle. And she says it. And she says, I need each one of you. It's too much pressure for me. And I love that because I'm 52 years old. I definitely grew up in that generation where it was, I only want to know when you're okay. I only want to know when you're happy. Because if you're happy, things are stable. But what I've been saying to my clients who I've been asking to go see this movie, when we were told by our parents or our grandparents or our teachers or our siblings or our friends, you're okay, right? Everything's okay. And if we say we're not okay, their quick response is, of course you're okay. Or why would you even be upset? You should just be grateful. And they're trying to push you back. And the reason why is not because that's the ultimate ideal optimal place, because we need all of the emotions. It's because they don't know how to hold space for it. So let me say that again. The reason why people want you to be happy all the time is not because happy is best. It's because that's what they know to hold space for. And if you're coming to somebody with sadness or envy or greed or anger or fear, if that individual person who you're coming to with it has never learned how to process that emotion, they don't know how to hold it for you, right? And so when we are whole, we get to use all of our emotions. If someone passes, no one should expect you to just be able to let it go and get past it and be happy. Sadness would be a natural response. If something were to happen and you were to stub your toe, anger and pain should be a normal response. If you're about to get into a car accident and you stop short, fear and anxiety would be a normal response. We are human beings with a range of emotions. We are not robots. So to think that we should dismiss anything other than happy, content, and joyful is really what's keeping so many people stuck. Because growing up, we were told you shouldn't feel that way. Or why would you even feel that way? Because the other person didn't know how to hold the space. So we didn't learn how to process emotions. We just stuffed it down. The only thing we would share is, I'm fine. I'm great. I'm happy, because we weren't getting the response we wanted. But we need anxiety. We need fear. We need anger. We need sadness. That's what makes us whole. The problem is when you have too much of one emotion and it overtakes everything versus it being in alignment with what's happening in that exact moment. So how does Inside Out 2 address the concept of core beliefs, and why is it important? So here's the thing. Our core beliefs are developed generally by the time we're 12 years old. And how are they developed? By us observing and living in our environment. So as we have different experiences throughout our life from ages 0 to 12, we're starting to formulate an interpretation of what life is. So a core belief could be safety is available to me, safety is not available to me. A core belief could be my voice deserves to be heard, or I should be quiet at all times and submissive. And we form these different beliefs. Those are just two simple examples based on either what we're told or what we observe, or how somebody reacts to us while we're trying to figure out who we are. The core belief that you form, it is the lens through which you then see yourself. And that is also the lens through which you see others and the entire world around you. So it's creating almost like a set of glasses or like a film over your eyes of how life is. How do I belong or not belong in this life? What is my value here? How do people interpret my value here? And then that completely shifts how you interact with the world and how you perceive the world is interacting with you. As a trauma recovery coach, one of the things that I decided to do in my practice is become certified in hypnosis and something called rapid transformational therapy. And the reason why is we can't change our lived experience. We can't change the things that have happened. We can't change the different ethnicities that we're born into or the different areas of the world that we're born into. We cannot change some of the things that actually create the core beliefs, but we can change the perception of the experience, which is the core belief. So when I take people on a journey back to self, and we feel so disconnected from self because things like our confidence or our self-esteem or a sense of worth or a deservingness is limited, I help people explore the core beliefs that they created by taking them back to the memory. And I ask them, during that time, what did you feel, see, hear, and experience? They'll share with me. And then I'll say to them, and at that time, what did you begin to believe about yourself? And they'll share that with me too. And sometimes the things that I hear from an experience, or I just learned I couldn't express myself, or I learned it was important for me to make sure everybody was happy all the time, or I learned to stuff down my emotions and not process them. And we can start to reframe. Okay, well, that was when you were 8. You're now 58. Let's take, for example, what do you know to be true today? I know this, that, and the other thing about myself. Okay, how is that same or different from what you learned about yourself when you were 8? And that's when we start to do the reframing. When we can start to reframe under hypnosis, we can change the core beliefs and create something that's more productive and more rooted in the truth of today, not the truth of maybe 50 years prior. So core beliefs are integral to how we show up in the world and to our psyche. I love the way that they showed these core beliefs or these core memories that created the belief. So you can see the lived experiences as the memories, and they come in these different colors. And then they're kind of put into this place in this new movie where they're put into this chute. We have to keep this as like a rooted one, and it roots down and it creates this core belief. And then that core belief creates this beautiful structure, fragile structure that they had, that is sense of self. So you can't have a sense of self without core beliefs, and you can't have core beliefs without lived experiences. They're all intertwined, and the movie did a beautiful job illustrating that. So as a trauma recovery coach who utilizes a methodology like parts work with her clients, there's this concept of being self-led. Being self-led is kind of the core around the entire concept of parts work. And when we are born and we're kind of brand new, we haven't even had one moment of experience yet, we have a sense of self. And we believe all things are available to us. Confidence, courage, curiosity, the worthiness of connection. When we need something, we know it and we're very clear about it. We have great clarity. So a great example is my diaper's dirty and I need it changed. And I'm going to let you know because I'm going to scream my head off. So I have the courage and the creativity and the voice and choice and the clarity, right? I'm clear that I need my diaper changed. I'm uncomfortable. I'm confident that I'm deserving of having my diaper changed. I'm creative because I'm going to use my voice. I've learned if I cry, my needs will be met, and I'm going to use my voice to do it. And I'm going to do it until my need is met, right? That's being self-led. You are rooted in self. You're very, very clear on who you are and what you're deserving of. Now, very early on in the process, or maybe a little bit further into the process of being alive, you start to witness if you showing up in your full self is getting your need met or not. And this is when we start to shapeshift. So we could start to shapeshift from the get, or it might take days, weeks, months, years. It just really depends on the experience. When we stop being fully self-led, and this is just a personal philosophy, I don't think anyone is really truly fully self-led 24/7, 365, unless you're a monk living in a monastery away from all of life's stressors, right? And so the idea for me is the goal is to be self-led as much as possible. So I always say to my clients, how do you recognize when you're self-led and how do you recognize when you're not self-led? Well, here's the answer. When you're self-led, you are in your flow, you feel fully aligned, you feel connected to yourself, you just feel grounded and rooted in who you are. You know it. There's a sensation. You feel calm, you feel at peace, you feel regulated. Your nervous system is not activated. It's very toned and you're able to rest and digest. Everything's working. How do you know when you're not being self-led? Because you're not in rest or digest. You're not centered. You're not feeling grounded and authentic. And I'll say to people, tell me how you do feel. And they'll say, my throat's tight. My chest is heavy. I have a hard time breathing. My heart is racing. My heart is pounding. I'm sweating. I need to go to the bathroom. I feel like I'm going to have diarrhea or I'm going to throw up. My stomach's agitated. My heart is agitated. My lungs are agitated. My throat is agitated. Each one of these organs has a nerve that runs through it called the vagus nerve, and it gets activated under threat. So if you're not feeling grounded and there's a part of you that feels as though you're going to disconnect in some way, shape, or form because of threat, your body needs to respond. So if we're activated, it's a really good sign that you're not self-led because there's other emotions, other parts that are having to come forward in your benefit with a sense of threat in mind. So what I do is I help my clients begin to recognize when they are or are not self-led. I have some clients that are like, I can't remember the last time my nervous system felt calm. That makes sense to me because from the age of 15 to 35, that was me. And I didn't even know it because it was my normal. I didn't know what a calm nervous system was until I had it. And then I said, oh my God, I haven't felt this in 20 years. So for some people that come to me, they're in this 24/7 agitated state. So we try to create some space and we try to create room for finding that piece of self and bringing it back in just so they can experience it, even if it's for a few minutes. Helping them recognize not just the activation, but also the different types of activation. I get as discreet as saying to my clients, okay, when anxiety is in play, how does it feel? When sadness is in play, how does it feel? When anger is in play, how does it feel? And I'm getting them to tune in to what I call the different ringtones because the activation is nuanced just enough when each emotion's at play or each part is at play that they can now start to become much more aware, much more curious. That's step one. Become aware and curious that a part's at play based on what's happening in the body. And number two, how do we see it, feel it, experience it? And can we create a little bit of space so we can just internally dialogue with it? Hey, I notice this part of me is really activated right now. What's going on? What are you trying to protect me from? What are you afraid I'm going to touch internally that I haven't learned how to process yet? So that's how that all comes into play. You know when you're self-led because none of that's happening, right? The only other time you could be that calm and not be self-led is if your coping strategy has just been to numb out and turn off all feeling altogether, which is a whole other ball of wax. Here are a couple of key takeaways from watching the movie. For me, as a trauma recovery coach, number one is that all emotions, or what I'm calling parts, are valid and that they belong and that they're important. And it's only when they kind of push all the other parts and the emotions out and take full control and full reign that it's a dysfunctional situation, right? So if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, one of the things I would love to say is go see the movie. See if the illustration and the way that they're able to exemplify and show how we're each ticking on the inside, where the internal conflict comes from, what that internal dialogue is, and be able to see it from another view and see that somebody else could create it that doesn't even know you, where it might actually hit a heartstring, will let you know that you're not alone. There's huge value in a movie like this. And I think the biggest value is someone can go and watch it and feel very seen and heard and understood, and they never met the creators of the film. If that happens to happen for you, it's a good indicator that what you're experiencing and dealing with is not super unique. The experience that's brought you here could be, but the response in your body is not. And so if you go to this movie and you feel seen, heard, understood in a way you've never been able to before, it's a great indicator that there's something at play. And your best next step is to find somebody who is trauma trained and trauma informed to help you go back and recognize how some of those lived experiences created those core beliefs and created your sense of self. Because that actually can change based on what it is that you want in your life. So listen, if this review is helpful for you and you've gone to see the movie and you want to dialogue about it, or if you've just watched this review or listened to this review and you just want to leave a comment, either leave a comment below or drop an email and let me know what your thoughts are, and I'd be happy to reply.